It is time to get started. Hi, as I've mentioned before, my name is Bill Gibbs. I'll be the host for this session, and I'll be introducing all of the presenters in just a moment. Today, we're going to hear from Sumona Banerji on Charting the Unseen, Building Cognitive Security. I think you'll find this to be an intriguing presentation. Here's the agenda, and in a little bit, I'm going to turn over control to Kimberly Mansell, who is our CWC Leadership Series host. She'll talk a little bit about what the Center for Women in Cyber is all about. Here's the agenda that we'll be following. I'm going to talk a little bit about Capital. I know that many of you are very familiar with the organization, but just a little bit. Some housekeeping, and then introduce Kimberly. Then Kimberly will in turn introduce our presenter, the presentation. We will be taking questions at the end. I'll talk about that in a moment. Then we'll talk briefly about the other webinars in the series, in the Cyber Leadership Series that we're doing through the fall into January. And finally, at the very end, at the end of the hour, we will be getting, I'll give you share information about how to get a copy of the recording slides and a certificate of participation. I see here that Kelly actually lives on campus, so she should probably be giving this presentation. But let me just say, I'm going to have one slide here about Capital. We always have one or two people in the audience who this is their first time to be exposed to the university. We're based in Laurel, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., and we've been around for a long, long time. This decade will celebrate our 100th anniversary. We're one of the few private universities in the entire United States that are specifically dedicated to STEM-based education, and that includes everything from the associate's degree right up to our doctoral programs, all in high-tech fields such as the one we'll be covering today on cybersecurity. Here's a little bit of housekeeping and how we're going to go ahead and handle everything today. We'll answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation, and I'm sure there will be questions, but at any time you can post the question into the text chat, so make sure you keep that open. We will circle back at the end to answer as many questions as we possibly can. Microphones and webcams are not being activated for participants, so the way that we need you to participate with us is through the chat. We'll be sending a link to the recording and to the slides to all registrants, and it'll be available as well on our web page. And we'll be sending a participation certificate to all who ask for one, both for live session participants and if you're watching this on demand, for you as well. At the end of the presentation, I will talk about how to get that certificate. With that, I want to give control to Kimberly Mansell, who will talk a little bit about the Center for Women in Cyber and the Cyber Leadership Series and introduce our speaker. So go ahead, Kimberly.
Thank you, Bill. As Bill mentioned, my name is Kimberly Mansell. I'm actually a director of cybersecurity and aerospace and the lead for emerging technologies for the Maryland Department of Commerce. And I have the pleasure of being on the advisory on the executive board for the Women in Cybersecurity. So we do a lot of important work here within the Capital technology ecosystem. And so I just want to give you a little bit of background about what we do and what we participate in and what our organization is all about. As far as our mission statement is concerned, we empower women of all ages to pursue cybersecurity careers through presentations such as this, hands-on activities, which we have on campus, and mentoring. The CWC community, the Center for Women in Cybersecurity community, provides direction, encouragement, and support to the next generation of cyber leaders. So we're very passionate about the work that we do, and we feel that it's very important to make sure that our voices are heard. This technology field's gender gap, it's pretty large. It's been a persistent challenge. And we feel at the CWC, we want women to seek opportunities in the important and developing field of cybersecurity so that their contributions can be embraced. It's very important for them to be heard and for everything that they do to be noticed as well. We women, we are unmatched in terms of creativity, perspective, and collaboration. So the CWC provides resources, direction, and positive and positive support needed for success in achieving professional and educational goals. So we are very excited to be able to host this every year, and I'd like to go ahead and go to the next slide if possible. So in this presentation, we have an opportunity to hear an absolutely outstanding individual by the name of Sumona Banerji. I told her I'd mess that up. So Sumona is actually a strategic foresighter, cyber psychology researcher, which is very interesting, an evolving youth advocate looking to build adapted systems of education, ethical technology, and mental wellness. So that's really an interesting combination. And as we said at CWC, it's really important for us to look at what these women are doing, their contributions, and embracing them. And she is extremely interesting, contributing her expertise in the exponentiality changing landscape. She aims to mitigate incoming risks from technological disruption at an individual, industry, and national level. Pretty impressive. Her team initiative, Mind Shield, is developing and promoting products and services with multidisciplinary organizations to build emotional intelligence, resilience, cognitive security systems, and digital awareness. Very exciting. Cybersecurity is part of a number of sectors, all sectors. It spreads across everything, kind of like peanut butter. And of course, Sumona's company and what this presentation is going to cover is complete evidence of that. It's wonderful. Now, Banerji earned a bachelor's degree in film production from George Mason University and a master's of design in strategic foresight and innovation from OCAD University, Toronto, Ontario. She is also part of our Center for Women in Cybersecurity. She is on the advisory board, and we are so happy to have her there. And without further ado, I would like to present Sumona Banerji in this today to present. Thank you. Sumona, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Kim. I know you guys probably just heard a bunch of very long words, and my goal here today is to demystify a lot of the work that we do around cognitive security. So nice to see everybody from all over the world. Firstly, hello. Thank you for giving this your time. I think the topic that we're talking about today holds a lot of critical urgency in how things are rolled out, especially as technology advances exponentially. And a huge part of the cybersecurity industry is very tech focused. And so when I entered this industry, I have a non-technical background myself. As you could see, I was an artist. I used to do documentary filmmaking. I worked as a psychology researcher, and then I worked in the AI space. And these industries all kind of merged for me together to build in the space of what we now know as cyber psychology, which is a very emerging field that lies at the intersection of tech, psychology, and cybersecurity. So for all those of you who may be also non-technical or have an interest on the human side of a lot of these solutions, this is something that you might find interesting and maybe even would like an opportunity to dig further into. And I'm always open for anyone who's interested in this field to come through. So we're gonna start, and the reason the slide at this presentation is called Charting the Unseen is because humans as we are very good at problem solving and measuring the tangible. We also try to find our solutions in the tangible, whereas a lot of the problems that arise, the source of threat and the problems to well-being that arise could lie in the intangible. But because the intangible is so hard to measure, is so hard to perceive, is so hard to see, we tend to fall short there. And when we also think of how the systems are designed around finding solutions, most investors, government grants, money also goes towards tangible solutions because again, we find peace in predictability. However, a lot of the solutions and the problems do arise in what we call the unseen. And how do we bring the unseen into the scene? That is the goal of this presentation and of cognitive security and Mind Shield as a whole. So I'm going to start with a story because I love stories. This is Tim. And Tim has lived with his family in this beautiful village. Lush green leaves, ever-flowing glacial water, and a thriving trade. Unfortunately, because this village is so beautiful, the village was under attack by a long-term neighboring rival village that's not doing so well. And so the villagers approached the king, and the king sent his soldiers to protect this village. The soldiers were stationed outside the village. They dug trenches, they set up barracks, they shielded all the attacks. They gave everything they had to protect this village. And they did a damn good job at keeping the enemy at bay. But as the days went on, the enemies became more and more powerful, cautious, and started learning the ways of the soldiers. They spent time observing the village, how people moved, how people walked, talked, how they did trade. And they started learning the weaknesses of the village. Soon they came up with a plan. They decided to stop fighting the soldiers outside the borders, outside the village, and instead executed a plot to only target and kill the tradesmen coming in and out of the village. And simultaneous to that, they decided to build a dam to dry out the water supply of the village. Before long, the village started starving. Tradesmen were too afraid to go in and out, and so trade slowed down. The water dried out. The food was scarce. And so as the battles at the borders reduced, the battles and new battles within the village began. Timmy, our little boy here, was not prepared for this. He did not grow up learning how to cook his own food, grow his own food, build a well, because he always had an abundance of all the resources he needed. He did not know how to deal with starvation. He had never learned how to use those resources or even imagined that he would have to experience the situation one day. Before long, the village was in complete mayhem. As the enemies watched from a comfortable distance, not even really having to engage or put in too many people at play, the families in the village started destroying each other. And the soldiers that the king had sent to protect them could do very little about it. And just like that, within a few days, without lifting a sword, the war was won. If only the villagers and Timmy were taught how to survive, how to use their resources, how to fight, how to understand these tactics. But why would they? There was no reason to before the war was actually waged, right? So this boy, Timmy, is a metaphor. He is the metaphor for our mind, the human mind. And just like the tactics of the enemies, the wars that we are experiencing and tackling today, they aren't just in the physical realm anymore. They aren't just in the infrastructure or the border physical fighting realm anymore. They are in the cyber realm and they are in the psychological realm. So I'm going to present 3 case studies to you. And I'd like you to, as you hear them, try and decipher what is the commonalities between these 3 different cases. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Blue Whale Challenge, but this was a social media trend that started in 2017. It originated in the chat rooms in Russia. And essentially, is known as the suicide game. The reason it's called the suicide game is because it created a trend of 50 tasks that an individual had to do over a period of 50 days, each task being more and more progressively dangerous. The challenge was quoted as get over your fear, do the dangerous, build resilience kind of a challenge. And who it targeted were children that had, and like based on the case studies, children that had high levels of anxiety and were isolated and were looking to feel more powerful or have more meaning in their life. So these children were recruited into these online chat groups that was curated by a curator, and they were made to do these 50 tasks. These 50 tasks ended with the 50th task being jumping off a building or committing suicide. The tasks also included cutting the hand with a blade, with F57 written on it. There's a reason for that. Waking up at 3 in the morning and watching a horror show, taking a certain psychedelic and entrancing themselves within a certain audio that was presented to them as a part of the chat group. What resulted from that was 130 cases spanning over Russia, Ukraine, and India of children that had committed suicide. And it's called the Blue Whale Challenge because for some reason, and this is still a mystery, these children posted images of a blue whale. The blue whale is also a metaphor for the only species, the only mammal that we know in nature that has been known to commit suicide. It actually comes to the shore and exits the water. And we still don't understand why or how they do it and what the purpose of that is. But that's why it was called the Blue Whale Challenge. So what was found was that the instigator who was arrested, his name was Philip, he was 21 years old. He was arrested for this game, for starting this game. But even after he was arrested in 2017, the game still went on. And so as researchers and journalists were trying to understand why this game was still going on, they entered these chat rooms pretending to be children, and they found that there were curators here who were also children. The curators themselves were between the ages of 12 to 16. And they essentially were copycats. They were copycatting the original curator. Moving on to case 2. This is a case of Jack Teixeira. Keep pronouncing his name wrong, Teixeira. This is from last year, April, actually, where he was a 21-year-old young employee of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, and he was arrested for leaking top secret government military files into a Discord group, a gaming Discord group filled with his community of online gamers. Apparently, there had been certain disputes on the group around certain topics, and Jack, in order to prove his value as an important member of the team and showcasing the authority that he had, released these documents to make a statement. What was found was that Jack, even though he was arrested on accounts of espionage, didn't really have any malicious intent. He wasn't actually being recruited by any foreign agency to do this. He was just trying to make a point. Case study 3. This happened in December of last year here in Canada, where a group of teenagers, with the youngest one being 17 in Calgary, were arrested on charges of planning terrorism in Calgary. And it was found that they were all part of an online group that was radicalizing them and had been grooming them over a span of about 6 to 8 months. And this boy has now been convicted and is facing charges for terrorism and espionage as well. So my question is, if you were the parent of a child like this, or if you were someone who knew someone who was being targeted and influenced and recruited into cybercrime or conducting something such as the suicide game, how would you respond to it? How would you stop them? How would you help them recognize what it is that they're truly dealing with? So today we go on a little journey to try and uncover what is exactly happening and why these psychological operations manifest. And I would, in the chat, feel free to leave your responses as to what you think was the commonality between these cases. So I'll give you a tad bit of one of the commonalities between these cases. And that is the threat assessment that was done in all these three cases showcased a weak sense of self-identity and a struggling to cope with family issues, which had led to a sense of isolation, creating a breeding ground where anxiety and the incentive models that are used to bait people in that psychological state in the hopes of giving them aspiration, purpose, meaning, that was the leading cause of a lot. That was the commonality between the profiles of everyone that we have seen here. And we can see, and now that levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness have been spiking, not just in Canada, but in America. It's a hockey stick right now, especially after COVID. And that really brought us to think, okay, if the mental state of a civilization is undergoing certain decline, what does that mean for the opportunities of cyber attack and cyber warfare? So this is our tagline, that the brain doesn't have a password. There are hardly any security patches for human vulnerabilities. And we have lived in the shadow of nuclear war for decades, right? But modern warfare, like we saw earlier, has taken a new form, which is not necessarily a mushroom cloud. Nuclear war would be a zero-sum game at the current state that the world is in. But the next war, or something that's might already be happening right now, is more likely to be a silent invasion, fought not just in cyberspace, but the synapses of our brain. So instead of a traditional war scenario, a country may be the target of an attack during the elections or during key legislations around national interest. Psychological operations, or PSYOPs, are now faster, cheaper, and far more scalable than any other weapon out there. And critically, it's anonymous. We know that, I think this is a heightened stat, it is above 75% of cyber crimes have social engineering involved. Why? Because no matter how powerful our security systems are, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And that link, that's the human. In the human mind, even though it is the most powerful tool that we have today, it is the most fragile as well. So what is cognitive security? Technical systems have defenses. Redundancies are built, firewalls are set, codes are encrypted, but there is no security system for the humans who control, design, and oversee these systems. And also, let's not forget that quantum computing is on its way. And a quantum computer can probably decrypt any encryption that we currently have, which is in binary. So what happens when quantum computing actualizes? What is the second line of defense? That is what we are trying to build. So cognitive security is a system and process to preserve the sanctity of the most powerful computer ever made, the human brain. defending it from manipulation, misinformation, psychological operations, deterioration to psychological well-being, and hence cyber attacks of all nature. So I want to show you this graph because this graph is amongst many things that drove my passion for cognitive security into a mission. What you see right now is the rate of change and across time. This is the human adaptability curve over here and the rate of technological advancement. And what you see is that the gap between the human adaptability curve and the rate of technological advancement is increasing. And this gap is called technological debt. Technological debt is the gap between tech advancement and human adaptability, which also showcases our inability to adapt to exponential technologies. As this gap grows, it makes it harder and harder for humans to adapt to the technologies in a healthy way and maintain control. So as technological debt grows, disruption grows, complexity and the potential of vulnerabilities grow as well. And it's all happening exponentially. So if we neglect the cognitive dimension, this debt will soon become unpayable. And it's a debt not just of technology, but of trust, of security, of autonomy, and perception and reality as a whole. Because that's what CogSec and PsyCops play on. They play on your perception of reality. So I spent the last few years trying to gain a better understanding of this fragility of the human brain and what makes it so. And what we saw was that the fragility or someone's vulnerability is directly correlated to their psychological state. But what does this mean? And how do we actually visualize and quantify someone's psychological state? Of course, we have tests and metrics right now to assess people on various dimensions. But when we talk about someone being in the downward spiral of cognitive decline or of the downward spiral with the end being depression, anxiety, vulnerability, suicide, what exactly are we measuring and how do we actually visualize where someone is on that? So that's what we try to develop, a way to visualize and quantify the downward spiral. And so in order to do that, we had to come up with a framework and make sense of this framework. So this framework is based on a very core theory. It's a very powerful theory that glared me straight in the face when I was on a random walk with a friend in the park, actually, of what causes this massive decline in psychological states that we are seeing today in the mental health crisis. So my friend had been in a car accident and had shattered his hip and his leg. And he was walking on a crutch. And I asked him how he was doing with his recovery. And he said that he's doing okay, but he didn't have a lot of hope for walking without a crutch again. And I asked him why. Because the thing was, his accident was 6 years ago. I knew he had been in recovery for a very long time, but he had not really improved, even though his physiotherapist said that he could. So I asked him, so what's going on? And he looked at me and he said, well, my physiotherapist keeps telling me I need to exercise, but honestly, like I don't like exercising. And also my legs hurt. So every time I try to exercise, it hurts even more. And so honestly, I'm just exhausted. I'd rather not. This crutch has been working fine for me. So I'm already kind of used to it. Might as well just keep with it. And it took me a while to like process the logic of this. My brain couldn't comprehend for a second, because even though the clutch gave him some relief in the short term, his strong leg was now developing ailments, knee problems, back problems, which further reduced his ability to walk because he was putting all his strain on one leg. So this further declined his ability to walk, which further decreased his health, and he was trapping himself. Why? Because he didn't want to put in the effort to exercise. That's when it clicked. When someone is unequipped to deal with experiences of stress, failure, trauma, loneliness, and is unable to find a supportive environment to do so, psychological well-being starts developing fractures. The mind is like water. It naturally takes the route of least resistance to get where it needs to. So in a desperate attempt to maintain some sense of well-being, a person who is fractured psychologically recruits what we call psychological compensation. Psychological compensation occurs when someone with a fractured psyche tries to find their crutches through drugs, alcohol, and most rampantly through technology. Many of which, by the way, are specifically designed to increase addiction, right? So though in the short term, it gives some sense of feeling good, if this crutch is used for too long, it only increases the fractures of the psyche. But again, I'm a visual person, so I needed to like visualize this downward spiral. So what we did is we have some great people working in this field of cognitive psychology. And one of them is Carol Reef. And Carol Reef has conceptualized what the 6 dimensions of a healthy psyche. We have autonomy, self-acceptance, positive relationships, environmental mastery, personal growth, and a sense of purpose. When these dimensions are in the positive for an individual, a person is said to have a healthy psyche or be in a state of well-being. So we use this as a starting point. So what happens if one or more of these dimensions are fractured? Compensation kicks in. And today the compensation is taking place through the maladaptive use of technologies, especially virtual social technologies. So starting with this foundation, we built what's called the working theory, it's still a theory, of cyber psychological compensation. Cyber psychological compensation is basically the trap that people fall into that increases the fractures in their cognitive security, increasing their risk of vulnerability and manipulation. So let's see how this works. So we have autonomy as the first thing. When someone's capacity for autonomy or trust in self-determinism is fractured, algorithmic determinism takes its place. Algorithmic determinism basically meaning trusting the decision-making and the judgment of an algorithm over your own intuition. Which is okay to a degree. Like no one is saying you shouldn't like look at the Netflix recommendation algorithm and look at it with like skepticism. That's fine. Like, but there is a degree that goes into that then starts creating information echo chambers like on YouTube or radicalized content. When an individual heavily relies on technology or algorithms as a source of truth, the individual might endlessly consume algorithmically driven content, easily getting trapped in, as I said, echo chambers, reinforcing certain beliefs, perceptions, reducing their capacity for informed decision-making and critical thinking, leading to potential radicalization, like the Calgary teenager that we talked about earlier. The second is self-acceptance. When someone's most primal human need to be socially accepted is diminished, self-esteem is fractured, and it's compensated through the pursuit of validation, through virtual platforms, activities, identities online that they take. So Jack Teixeira that we saw, the 21-year-old employee, as we saw, he released the files on a gaming website just to impress his friends, to show off, because he felt like his authority was under attack. And he wanted to establish himself as a valuable member of this community. How easy can this be, right? A person experiencing consistent failures in their personal or professional life might become problematically engrossed in online multiplayer games, for example, where they finally experience some sense of victory, of influence, of success. The intense need for approval can make anyone a target to conformity pressures and groupthink. Maybe He wasn't specifically targeted to release those files, but he might as well have been. Making them, he would have been susceptible to emotional manipulation just to gain social status. Then we look at positive relationships, and I think this is a pretty obvious one. We all know what happens when someone has a fractured or non-existent healthy real-world relationships. They're compensated by virtual ones. And it's not just virtual human relationships. We're also now moving the increasing trend into virtual AI and bot relationships, right? AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends, which further lead to weakened real-world human connection. Because why would you want to work with a real-world human that comes with all the unpredictability, trauma, stress, problems, when you can just code a relationship into an AI to be perfect to what you want? So you're locked up in your room for 13 hours a day. The erosion of face-to-face interaction increases isolation and loneliness, reduces empathy, increases dehumanization of the other group, which is fertile soil for germinating divisive and polarizing narratives and radicalization, like the political polarization we are seeing in America today. Think about how COVID and isolation, the breaking of relationships, just human interaction during COVID created a psychological state that has propelled the polarization that we see in America today. Next, we have environmental mastery. Environmental mastery is a person's ability to deal with unpredictability in their environment and respond effectively. That's being compensated with environmental control. As we move more and more into immersive realities, metaverse being the next frontier, we can control the variables of who we are, where we are, how we are. If we mess up in the digital world, we can just exit the situation. We literally just block someone. So we act without actually having to experience the consequences of our actions to the full extent. But that's not how it works in the real world, right? But if we keep spending more time in an environment where we can control all the variables, we decrease our ability to build resilience in the real world. The next is personal growth with reward addiction. We all know reward addiction, the hacking of the dopamine system, which causes massive overstimulation or digital information overload, distraction, attention, and our ability to focus as human beings is under attack because of the hacking of the dopamine system that technology is designed to do, because that's how they make their money. And our inability to focus and keep attention on one thing, the distraction causes someone to be vulnerable to cyber attacks, because if someone is targeted when they're exhausted or tired or distracted, they're more likely to just not switch on their critical thinking hat. And the last is a sense of purpose being compensated with digital escapism. We are experiencing, because of the internet, it's good and it's bad. By the way, I'm totally neutral to the internet and technology. I'm a technologist optimist, so just to put that out there. But there is so much overload of information of what's happening in the world. There's climate change, there's human trafficking, political polarization, women's body situations, LGBTQ. There's so many social situations that we are bombarded with on a daily basis that people start feeling overwhelmed. They don't really know how to make a difference, how to actually change anything. And a lot of people experience overwhelm. And so when you experience overwhelm or a sense of doom or existentialism because you think that the world is going to, don't mind my language, shit, a lot of people choose to escape. And then escapism becomes the compensation. That means escapism into either, dark rooms where there is online manipulation or grooming taking place for extremist groups, or in a virtual reality space where you can just live and have a little utopia of your own, or in video gaming, right? We get addicted to gaming and you'd rather just live in that world than in this real world. So the problem is, as each of these 6 dimensions in the green start fracturing, the compensation kicks in, and they're all feedback loops, as you can see here with the plus and minus. They're all feedback loops, which means as you go more into the red zone, you go less and less away from the green. You go more and more away from the green zone. And the problem is, each dimension of psychological well-being is connected. They're all interconnected to each other. So as one starts fracturing, they all start collapsing like dominoes, leading to a state where someone is living as a puppet, purely in the compensation loop. Best, most fertile target for online manipulation, cyber attack, or being used as a scapegoat to commit cyber attack, including children, because most vulnerable populations, old people and children. So this is what we call, how we visualize the downward spiral. On the left here, you have the cognitive risk spiral, which increases vulnerability. And our whole mission at MindShield is to reverse the spiral and move into the green zone, which we called the cognitive resilience spiral, which is high resiliency. What happens if we do not focus on this? Just as much as we are focusing on infrastructure solutions in cybersecurity and tech. If we don't focus on this, the implications are massive, right? Like they manifest and they spread like wildfire, like cognitive risk and these things like misinformation, they are spreading like wildfire. And the implications are everything from wide-scale manipulation to civil unrest, to erosion of social cohesion and trust in authority, trust in each other, polarization. And just like the story that we started with earlier, a country can be brought down to its knees today without raising a single gun, just by doing this. PsyOps. Okay, so how do we reverse the loop? It's a massive question. And we should have started 10 years ago, to be honest. But we're here now and we still have time. We are playing catch up, but we can catch up. And we are currently trying to develop solutions to go there, but it's not a one-man show. It is, and has to be, a collective movement with the industry professionals. So there are a few things that we believe are part of the solution space. One is resilience training. So training for critical thinking, teaching people how to ask the right questions and analyze information as they're getting it. See, even with a lot of misinformation, technology can erode, can filter misinformation, but at the end of the day, the consumer themselves also need to be trained. So how do you create zero trust mentality, which is also another concept, maybe for a different seminar, but how do you create the distance between you seeing something online and not taking it at face value as the base, like something to cultivate as a paradigm for people? Emotional regulation, helping them manage emotions like fear, frustration, or excitement that cloud judgment, because these are the emotions that are used as bait, right? Sense of urgency and fear. If you look at any scam call, fraudulent call, social engineering situation, they're always using fear and urgency to get you to react. So how do we help people emotionally regulate when they can sense fear and urgency being triggered by an external party? Digital literacy, just understanding how content is created, how the algorithms work, and how manipulation takes place, what the process is of manipulation. The more you know the process, the more you can identify it. And social awareness, and just being mindful on how interactions are changing people's worldviews. And this way, we can also keep talking to each other and building more awareness of how these things occur. The second solution that we're looking at is called digital nutrition. Now, one of the problems in this whole digital well-being space that we currently have is that technology addiction is looked upon as a drug addiction or a gambling addiction. And as MindShield, we kind of move away from that paradigm. We actually think that paradigm is ineffective because unlike drugs and alcohol and gambling, we cannot abstain from technology. It is a core part of our lives. We have to adapt to it. We can't fear it. And so instead of looking at it as a drug addiction, we are looking at it as an eating disorder. Because food is the only resource where you can have a maladaptive relationship to, where you cannot abstain from the resource. And so we are moving towards finding solutions that equate how you would deal with an eating disorder to how you would deal with digital disorders. Thinking of Anorexia, for example, being the resistance to technology, which is also not healthy because it'll leave you behind, right? Like we need to transition into adapting, and bulimia being the overconsumption of it. And so like creating that healthy balance. It's metaphorical, obviously, this is all just metaphorical, but just to give you an idea. And the third is connection. Creating spaces where people can build more connection and community, because at the end of the day, the more connected we are, the less disconnected we are, the more social support we have, the more our psychological well-being, all 6 dimensions actually just naturally start going into the green. That's just evolutionary. So building communication skills so people can resolve conflict, build empathy, deepen relationships, creating environments of safety, helping create judge-free environments where people can share opposing views with respect and dignity. And also, one of the programs we have rolled out is the cyber safe parenting program. So teaching parents on how to create environments of safety for their kids to open up to them, and why that is important. Not just because, oh, that makes you a great parent, but no, like your kids, like your kid can be radicalized or polarized or like get caught in this trap if you do not do this. So if you know a parent really cares about the well-being and the long-term well-being of their child, we're really trying to position that this is important. The child has to be able to come and talk to their parents, just like employees have to be able to go and talk to their leadership if they experience if they're a victim. And right now, shame and guilt keep people away from talking about their victimization, which is also causing more of the problem. So we have to take away the shame and the guilt and this destigmatize victimization. Emotional intelligence, the ability to read emotions, build attunement, respond effectively, collaborate, which helps with connection and building healthy relationships, real world relationships. And mindfulness, which is a part of that as well. Awareness of your emotions so you can detect when you're being manipulated, non-reactivity, and also 2 forms of thinking. So there's systems 1 and systems 2 thinking. Systems 1 thinking is more intuitive, emotional, fast decision making. Systems 2 thinking is more slow, critical, analytical decision making. We usually trigger one of these 2 processes in any decision we make, every human. And as emotional beings, if you are making an emotional decision, where do you want to eat today, or in love, you trigger systems 1 thinking. But if you're a trader, or if you're an investment banker, or you're a financial analyst, you are trained to think in systems 2. And a lot of people are vulnerable or become victims to cyber threat because they trigger systems 1 thinking instead of systems 2. So even just that one shift on training people to move into systems 2 thinking, which requires, and mindfulness is a part of that practice, can be a huge part, can solve a huge part of the problem. The other thing we really need to do is break industry silos. Right now, the tech industry, cybersecurity industry, psychology, education, everybody's having different conversations about the same topic and are in their own bubbles. And we really need to break these silos, which means bringing in people who are designers, psychologists, neuroscientists, artists, because artists also have a very deep understanding of the human mind and how behavior, like think about how artists create culture and shape behavior in a society. So we need to bring in artists, we need to bring in cybersecurity professionals, educators, mindfulness and wellness coaches, and just coders and people working in building the next generation of technology. The industries and professionals from these industries or enthusiasts or students who are trying to get into these industries need to be brought together to start the conversations and actually roll out effective solutions for cognitive security. That's the only way it would be holistic and effective. And so our goal with MindShield is to make cognitive security a global standard within cybersecurity and within the mental health industry as well. And for anyone who is interested in this topic, we are open and we are looking for experts and students and anybody who is enthusiastic about this topic, we're looking to collaborate with. So if you are from any of these spaces, you can go into the MindShield website and sign up and we will reach out to you. And that is the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to turn control now back to Kimberly so that she can move through these questions. I see 4 or 5 different questions that have already been asked. We have only a few minutes to take Q&A, but we'll do as much as we can. So Kimberly, if you have your text chat open, you'll notice that the first
Yes.
question was from Saira Williams. And if you can go ahead and question that, and then we'll go from there.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Sumona. That was an awesome presentation, and it looks like we got a couple questions for you. The first one is from Sayer Williams, and it says the gaming group related to Warhammer. Out of curiosity, it's a video game or a group.
I do not know. I have not heard of Warhammer,
Oh,
but
okay.
guessing that there are multiple such gaming groups. A lot of these there are a lot of these groups that have, like, even in Fortnite and World of Warcraft, there are a lot of these groups that discuss war strategies, and like if people want to establish themselves as a member, like, their authority or expertise in that group has caused quite some other situations, not just with Jax to Shiro.
All righty, let's move to Keith's question. He said, so what percentage of the population with these 6 dimensions of psychological well-being, I think, fall into these states? Thus, there are a percentage of the population who this spiral would not apply to.
So this spiral applies to every human being. What percentage of the population would, this is the spiral of psychological well-being, which every human being has. Every human being has these 6 dimensions. But what if
Okay.
if the question is what percentage of the population falls into the red zone versus the green zone, that is something that we are actually building out the assessment to find out. Hopefully the answers come to us soon, and it's more majority green than red, but we don't really know because it's also based on the geographical locations. And like, if you took this to a war zone, you would have a lot of red. If you took this to Scandinavia, where people are relatively really happy, it would have a lot of green. So we are, it really just depends on the population that the assessment is delivered to.
Interesting. Interesting. So it's the environment that contribute to
Yeah,
what
it's
you'll find the results, which makes sense in psychology. Yes.
absolutely good.
Let me see if I can get one more in from Aslek. It looks like, do you see this as a generational problem, as in the older generations, baby boomers, Gen X, are not so much online as the younger generations, and especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha? Who do you believe are most responsive to this?
I think Gen Z and Gen Alpha have the biggest role to play
Okay.
in building this out, because with Gen Z especially, we still understand life without, we remember a world without technology being what it was today. So we are actually the last generation that knows the before and the after, that has an idea of the contrast of what real life versus the virtual life looks like. And so we are in a very unique position to create a balance and be a moderator between everyone who's going crazy into the tech and everyone who's totally resisting it. We actually we are in the position of the most power to make that change and be relatable as we're rolling it out. And Gen Alpha, obviously, like, and children being born like today need to be trained for what life is going to be 10, 15 years down the line, which we can't even probably predict. But I think teenagers and children need to start developing cognitive security at a young age, so that by the time they, because the younger you catch them, the better, the more receptive they are. It just becomes a part of their thinking process and system, right? So we need to deliver it to the youngest population right now, and Gen Z is the population, I think, that has the best reach to do that.
Agreed, agreed. Well, I want to give a big thanks to Sumona Banerji. Her information is on the slide, I know. We are grateful that you're here today and that you gave this great presentation. And the cyber or the Center for Women in Cybersecurity at CapTech are very lucky to have you on our advisory board. So we look forward to working with you in the future. And I think that takes us back to Bill to wrap this up.
Yes, thank you very much, Kimberly. And again, my special thanks to Sumona. A very fascinating, intriguing presentation. Let's go on. We're nearly done. We want to make sure that we finish on time. And so I know we have to cut these questions short. I will be sending a copy of the slides and a link to the recording to everybody. So you'll be able to review some of this material again. I wanted to talk about the next 3 webinars. All are part of the Cyber Leadership Series sponsored by the Center for Women in Cyber. On October 19th, which is all of these are Thursdays, on October 19th, we'll be hearing from Dr. Iorga about core principles of cyber research through the outcome lens. On November 21st, from Donna Dodson, cryptography, an interdisciplinary approach to today's cryptographic infrastructures. Now, if you want to get in trouble, try to say that 3 times fast, but it'll be a fascinating look at a field of cyber that not very many people are aware of. And then cybersecurity leadership starts long before an attack with Dwayne Hart on January 16th. So I encourage you, the website is here. I want to go to the next slide as well, where, and again, we'll be sending you these slides to view these to register for any of these upcoming webinars, or to view on-demand webinars that we've conducted in the past. Here is the website. A little bit long, but again, we'll send you the slides so that you can capture it from there. Now, I just want to mention real quickly that Capital offers regionally accredited degrees related to this webinar, not precisely related to her topic, but definitely related to cybersecurity and fields related to that. And we offer a monthly information sessions, both at the master's and doctoral level. These are virtual. If you're interested in that, follow through on your own on that. And then finally, I want to just mention that the slides and the recording link will be sent to all registrants. And also you can obtain a certificate of completion. We'll send you out an email. If you just simply respond to the email, hey, I want a certificate, here's the name I want on the certificate, I'll be happy to take care of that for you in the next couple of days. Now with that, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate both our presenter, but I appreciate all of those who've joined us today. Look forward to getting this email from me later today, and look forward to our next session together. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close this down now, and thank you so much for joining us, and all of you have a great afternoon and weekend. With that, we will close.